Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. My name is Adam. You can refer to me as he, him. And joining me today once again, Stuart DeVille. Stuart, how are you doing?
Very good. Feels like we haven't talked in ages. That's a massive lie. All we do is talk game dev, and sometimes we record it. You are
Well,
witnessing this such thing.
exactly. We just hit every now and then. We're like, oh, maybe we should capture this and just record whatever we're talking about because it might be of interest to people.
But yeah.
But yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of interesting topics that we were talking about anyway, today we wanted to have a chat about house rules and balance in video games, and just talking about how these sort of games, how games in general just kind of balance themselves. Some games are really well balanced, some games are not. What kind of interest do you about house rules and balance, do you?
What doesn't interest me about house rules and balance? So I can't believe that when we were talking about it before, I didn't twig. Like, I hear house rules all the time, and I just take it for granted that, like, yeah, it's just a thing. And as I was saying to you before we start recording, I used to play Street Fighter with a bunch of other kids, and our main house rule was you can't play as Blanca because you could just sit there and electrocute in the corner, and it was just an annoying thing. Like, there was no skill to it. You're just button bashing in the corner. And we were like, look, we want to have a fun game of Street Fighter and show off the skills that we actually have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's a key point when it comes to balance, is that some games do have these kind of aspects to them that are unbalanced. So just to give people sort of an intro, I'll come back to house rules in a minute, but to give people like an intro into balance as a whole. Obviously, balance. I hope you know what balance means in general, as in, things being unequal on both sides. You can have a piece of wood balanced on something; it's not going to fall over. It's even, essentially. So when it comes to video games, balance is basically the idea that the thing is not too difficult and it's not too easy. You can't just win, but it's not but you're not immediately going to lose. The idea that everything is kind of balanced and that it's easy for you to do whatever it is that it's going to take. Now that doesn't mean that it's necessarily just straightforward for you. You may still need to be skillful. You may still need to understand the game. But the other half of balance is that it is fair, that you feel like what has happened is fair. So if you are an unskillful player and you play against a skillful player and you lose, you feel like that is fair because that's what's meant to happen. If an unskillful player who's never played the game before can pick it up and beat somebody who's been playing it for 2 years, that's probably unfair and probably unbalanced as well by the fact that that person is able to do it. So what I wanted to talk about today is talk about why where balance comes into it and how it plays out in different video games. Have you got any games, Stu, that you've played that you're like, well, I mean, obviously, so talking there about clearly playing your friend's Street Fighter when Blanca turns up, you are very unhappy because it's unbalanced. Have you any games that you've been unhappy about the balance in?
I think balance is like, for someone who's creating a game, it can sometimes be a tricky thing to know, right? Because if you think about games like super hard games like Dark Souls, the whole point of that game is that it's supposed to be brutally hard, and the balancing that you have in that is that it's brutally hard, but it's still playable. Like, you can still play a game that is that hard and enjoy it, and you need to know your target audience and know that's the kind of game that they're going to enjoy. You're not likely to get people who just pick up games and want to play for like 5-10 minutes. You're going to get people who want to pick up a game and play for hours and like have a good old slog. So balance is a balancing act for the developers.
And there's a word for that, which is that basically games like Dark Souls are considered perfectly imbalanced, which is that the game may appear unbalanced in so much as unbelievably powerful enemies, unbelievably weak main character, whatever it may be, but in that chaos you are able to balance is struck by whether it be skill or ability or being able to understand the tactics well enough to circumnavigate bias and difficulties within the game. So that and it's called perfectly imbalanced. It's actually just balance, right? The whole point is that there are so many unbalanced things that appear unbalanced that as a group they then appear balanced. Now there's an argument about a game like Overwatch. A lot of people consider Overwatch to be can be unbalanced, but another argument is that it is perfectly imbalanced in so much as if you have the right combinations of characters and skill in terms of your individual players, you are able to overcome most considered OP strategies, overpowered strategies. It's not a given. You're not necessarily going to be able to beat it if you don't. And it might be you just have to have the exact right, really skillful players playing as these characters to beat it. But it could be considered as a perfectly balanced game, and certainly Dark Souls is a great example where it will feel unbalanced straight off the bat because you walk up to an enemy, the enemy pokes you, and you die, and that's Dark Souls. Well done, you are dead. But as everyone knows, Dark Souls can be beaten. It's about skill and learning the rules of the game and how it's played and leveling up your character over time, so that you are able to overcome those bosses and enemies over time, and that the sense of being outweighed by those enemies is how the game. It's what the game's designed for. It's meant to make you feel that when you do beat it, it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling that you've overcome whatever it is. Similar thing to my brain is mixing up two games. My brain is saying Super Red Dead Boy, which is not the game I'm thinking of.
Super Meat Boy.
Super Meat Boy. Thank you. It was the meat I couldn't get, and it just went Red Dead, and I don't know why. Super Meat Boy is a brutally difficult game. Brutally difficult.
Insane.
But it is beatable, and loads of people have beaten it. And the idea is that you are throwing yourself against it until you hit the right combination of jumps and moves and things, because you become more skillful at it. Now, is it unbalanced? I mean, it's sort of static, so it's hard to call the game unbalanced. It's very, very difficult, for sure, but in terms of a game, and you kind of have to go into it knowing that that's the experience you're going to get. If you go
For me, the balance is the fact that there's always a path to winning. It might not be easy, but there's always a path to win. I also feel like people who play these types of games are the kind of people that will do well in life. Like, if you're able to just be like, okay, it's going to be a slug, but I know there's a way through here, and on the other side, it's going to feel amazing. Like, they're probably the same kind of people that run like Tough Mudder and stuff, right? They're just primed for successful lives.
Yeah, and it's difficult to call balance in a game where it's you against the computer, because the idea is then, and we'll talk about where that does count in a minute, but particularly when it's you against the environment's probably a better example in terms of you against whatever is going on in the world. So say the platforming in a platforming game, or the boss AI and that kind of stuff. When it turns to more competitive gaming, that's when it becomes particularly important. So, as you already brought up the example of Street Fighter, for example, anything that involves PvP, people taking on each other, and all that kind of thing, that's where it's really, really important to have balance in your game, because otherwise you can end up in a situation where people can just win by knowing where the imbalance is, or that people feel that they lost unfairly because the other person played as an unbalanced character. And especially if you follow any kind of fighting game scene, so Super Smash Brothers is a great example of this, because there's so many characters in it that often people will find something in the game which gives them a distinct advantage because it is more powerful, and therefore it is unbalanced. It's not a fair fight because that person is using something that is really overpowered. Similarly, in Warzone, Call of Duty Warzone, for example, there was a skin that was all black, and it was like a stealth suit, and the problem is that it made it very hard to see that player under certain conditions, which allowed them to, I think there may have been some glitches as well, but certainly at the very basic, it made it incredibly difficult to see, which gave them a distinct advantage. So then everybody played that character instead, which is not, it's not balanced at that point. It's just, it gives an unfair advantage to someone based not on their skill or their ability, but based purely on some other minor kind of advantage that they have in that situation.
You've touched on something quite interesting there, because when you think about it, like, this type of situation happens in all games. There's always, or at least there tends to always be, a point at which if you've played it long enough and you've learned the game well enough, there is something that you can take advantage of to make you succeed more than other people. It's something that happens a lot in card games, obviously, and in some cases that people have decided, like in casinos, for example, you can't play that way. If you're playing that way, that's considered cheating. And I think when it comes to developing games, especially like once your game is out there, you don't have any more control over it. So all you can hope is that Well, it does kind of happen naturally, right? You get people who, like you say, they discover this skin, it allows them to have an advantage. Then other people realize that that's an advantage, so everyone has that same advantage because they're all using the same skin, and it tends to rebalance itself. But in some cases, once you've made your game and it's out there, you can't rewind the clock and be like,
Especially, I mean, it depends how fundamental it is. I mean, when it's aesthetics, it's easy. Well, you'd think it'd be easy to take it out of the game and do it that way. But it certainly comes into it when it's a very kind of set game, especially anything like board games and stuff in particular. They are the ones that suffer the most from an imbalanced kind of play style. And there are one of the worst experiences that I've had with a video game, with a board game, actually came from a game that to win the game, you had to perform an action that basically allowed a piece to move all the way across the board several times. But one of the ways that you play the game resulted in you resetting that piece back to the beginning. So the game had a glitch in it that basically allowed a physical board game had a glitch that allowed you to basically prevent the game from reaching a conclusion. And I've actually seen this in a digital game as well. On the I think it's the PlayStation 2. There is I think it's PS2. It's Harry Potter Quidditch World Cup. This is going back a long way now. There's a flaw in the game design, which is in the original theoretical game design of Quidditch from the books, which is that the game only ends when you catch the golden snitch. You get some points. And in the book, they joke about the fact that this game went on for 4 days because nobody caught it. In the game, they didn't actually deal with that. They allowed it to happen, which is that to catch the snitch, basically over the course of the game, you perform skillful actions, and these two pieces of the snitch kind of form closer together, and whichever side wins that kind of movement battle, so whichever side it's closer to, is the one who gets the opportunity to catch the snitch when the two pieces come together. Okay. But if you perform a special move, your bar goes down, because you're basically using up some of your charge, if you will, to do a special move that you can score. Which the problem is that if you play and every couple minutes do a special move, those two pieces never actually meet. So you never end, and you can't end the game without those meeting. There's no time limit. You just have to keep playing. I remember finding this because I broke the score in a match where I hit 990. I think it was 990 was the max I could hit. And every time I scored after that, it wouldn't go up anymore because that was the end of the counter. And the other team were on like 70 or whatever it was. And I realized that to end the game, I would physically have to decide to bring those pieces together. And that is another form of imbalance, where you basically have to impress upon the player to choose to do something that is not strategic with a view to ending the game, which is a whole different kind of thing. So you have to take these. But
this even happens to a certain extent in chess, right? There is a point at which you can play chess to where there is no logical ending, and you just have to both agree that the match is over. You have to go, well, you can't take me. I can endlessly defend. We could be doing this for the rest of time if we want, or we can just agree it's a draw and let's try another game.